Hola a todos, buenas noches y bienvenidos nuevamente a otro webinar de la Asociación de Venezolanos en el Reino Unido, AVEUK. Mi nombre, como siempre, es Ernesto Moreno, presidente y cofundador de la asociación, y para mí es un placer darles a todos nuevamente la bienvenida a otro episodio donde estaremos creando o dándoles herramientas para que puedan tener éxito aquí en el Reino Unido, tanto profesional como personalmente. La sesión de hoy en particular, como lo hemos anunciado en la promoción y también durante los emails, va a ser en inglés y tenemos un invitado especial a quien me complace enormemente tenerlo como el ponente de la sesión de hoy, mi ex colega y amigo Adam Katz. Así que me paso a inglés de una vez y bueno, como siempre, en términos de la logística, recuerden que tienen la posibilidad de utilizar las sesiones de preguntas y respuestas, Q&As, abajo en los botoncitos para que vayan haciendo las preguntas que quieran durante la sesión con Adam, y también luego durante la sesión de preguntas y respuestas, después de que él termine su ponencia, vamos a estar también dando la oportunidad, si quieren levantar la mano, para que entonces hagan su pregunta en vivo o nos comenten algo que quieran comentar. ¿Ok? Bueno, sin más, vamos a entrar. I had the opportunity actually to invite Adam. I met Adam when I was working at PwC as a management consultant. For those that you don't know, my previous job, apart from running the businesses that I run now today as an entrepreneur, was a management consultant, and I had the pleasure to work for PwC in the HR and change practice. And that's where I met Adam for the first time. We were colleagues, we were in the same projects, and I was always impressed not only by the professionalism that Adam had in the work that he did, but also how he conducted himself amongst the peers, amongst the group and the team, somebody who was really trustworthy right from the start and who was still, I'm proud to call a friend so many years later. Adam has been doing some very interesting things in his career. And as the title of the webinar says, you know, he started as a delivery, pizza delivery boy, essentially, and then went from there to become a manager as a management consultant in PwC. Part of what we'll be hearing today is the story how he managed to do that, and what he's going to be sharing with us is a lot of tips of how to land the interview, even when you don't have contacts, when you don't know nobody in the industry. He will be sharing some of the tips and some of the techniques of how to be able to pick the interviews that you want to pick to then find the job that you want. In terms of Adam's background, so as mentioned, apart from being a pizza delivery driver, then a management consultant, after his years in PwC, we both left. Adam went and then got another job in another of the big four consultancies, Ernst & Young, EY, spent a few years there, and after that he decided to go back into the industry instead of being consultant. He then went and got a job that he still retains and still have today at Whitbread. For those of you that don't know, Whitbread is the company where the parent company of Costa Coffee and also the hotel chain Premier Inn. So his role there, he'll probably tell you a little bit more about that. It's in our organizational development and organizational design, anything to do with improvements of the organization. And on the side, he then be setting up his coaching business where he is helping people like yourself to find the job that they're looking for, and have a number of seminars, coaching sessions and stuff like that. And you can get in touch with Adam after the session if you want to. Right, without further ado, I'm going to now welcome Adam into the webinar. Adam, welcome.
Thank you, Ernesto. Great to be here.
Great to see you, and thank you so much for
my pleasure
for accepting the invitation to share with us, and particularly with the Venezuelan community, all the tips that you have around, you know, how to land that perfect interview, how to find that job. We are really looking forward to seeing what you have to share with us today. And I'm not going to make it any longer to wait. I'm going to disappear and leave you in charge of the stage. I know that you're going to have about sort of 40 minutes, more or less.
Roughly. Depends how excited I get. When I get excited, I talk more.
Okay, hopefully you get very excited. And then after that, I'll be back, and then we'll be moderating the questions from the audience and the participation, so we can then give you more of what you want. Okay, over to you, Adam. Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, first of all, Ernesto, again, thank you for hosting me today. As Ernesto mentioned, we met when we were working together at PricewaterhouseCoopers at PwC. And I echo what the sentiments that Ernesto shared. Ernesto, for me, was someone, he always stood out as someone who has strong values and he lives by those values. And so when we caught up sort of a couple of months ago, it was no surprise to me that he's started this organization during lockdown. It's very much an Ernesto thing to do. It was also very nice for me to kind of listen to some of the Spanish at the beginning. So I don't have any Spanish, but my father-in-law is Colombian. So my Spanish is no good, but I have worked out when he's insulting me. So in particular, when he insults the size of my ears quite a lot. So that much I have learned, but other than that, I will be sticking to English. So let me just switch on to share my screen. Okay, so as Ernesto said, I'm going to be sharing the story, my story of how I went from pizza delivery driver to PwC. And I've tried to boil down the lessons to try and make them applicable for you. And as some people who've moved over here and you don't necessarily have your own network, how do you start to land these jobs that you really want? That you should be getting and that you can be getting without the background or without the with all the barriers that come in the way with for moving country. So what we'll cover is we'll really I'll try to understand and explain how the process works. So why do people struggle to find work? We'll help people to understand what that is and what you can do to land an amazing job, and all without an existing network and without applying online. I'll show you exactly how the recruitment process works, how the system works, why it's rigged against you, and then what we can do to navigate around that. As Ernesto said, I've got my own coaching business. So if you do want to be in touch, hopefully everything I give you today will be enough to get you going and get you enable you to land that amazing job. But I will tell you how I can help you further if that's something that's relevant for you. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. Does any of this sound familiar? Hundreds of applications disappearing into black hole, wanting to make a career change, but feeling or being told you don't have the experience. All of you guys, you've moved overseas, you've got no network to help you land that goal, etc., etc. I certainly experienced a lot of these frustrations in my own journey, and I know many others do too. And I know some people feel stuck in their jobs. Maybe they're underpaid, or there's no growth prospect, or you were qualified. You qualified in Venezuela. You have got good qualifications, but you're just struggling to apply that here. So the work that you're doing just doesn't match up to what you want to be doing and what you should be doing. So when you're going through your job search, you feel like you're trying everything and you're getting no results. It can really knock your confidence, and you start to think, is there something wrong with me? But the truth is, it's not your fault, and I want you to understand why. So the job search process is not easy. And if you're here tonight, you probably know that all too well. But why is it so difficult to find a job? And not even just, not even a job you love, but just any job. So if you're like most people, then I'm going to take you behind the scenes on two secrets, and secrets I partially learned in my own journey. So I'll be sharing my personal journey, my personal story. But I only fully began to appreciate once I was working with Ernesto, working in management consulting, where I was designing recruitment functions, designing recruitment processes for some of the world's leading organizations. So why do people struggle to find jobs? So number one, the process we are taught is all wrong. The process we're taught is all wrong. If I think back to when I was entering the job market, I was all wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and full of excitement, full of confidence about landing my next role and my next career change. And the conventional wisdom told me, well, if you want to find a job, go to where the jobs are, which is job sites. And all the advice I received from trusted sources back this up. So friends, family, school, my university, the career counselors at university, Google. So this is the advice that you get when you Google how to land a job, how to land more interviews. All the advice I received backed this up. And essentially it was telling me, tweak your CV, adapt your CV for the job and your covering letter for the job you're applying for, and submit lots of applications. So that's what I started doing. I sat down every day, finding jobs that I wanted to do and jobs that I could do. I tweaked my CV, I tweaked my cover letter, and I hit the submit button on the online applications. And I did this all day, every day. and the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. And I literally mean hundreds and hundreds of applications later, it still wasn't working. And I kept getting similar advice. You need to apply to more jobs. You need to widen your search, to widen your chances of landing something. And this was so frustrating. And one of the reasons is because the systems and the processes companies have set up. So the first part of why job seekers struggle, that's on us as job seekers. It's our activity to tweak and submit our CV. But as I continued to hear nothing back, or at best, I received an automatic rejection message, it just felt like I was sending my CV into a black hole. And that brings us on to secret number 2. The hiring systems and the processes that companies use are broken. If you feel like you're sending your CV into a black hole, it's because you are. It's because you are. The processes, they just don't work anymore. Fundamentally, the way we apply for jobs has changed dramatically, and company culture hasn't necessarily caught up with that. So the evolution of how companies advertise vacancies, to be honest, it's been going on for over 150 years, but it's changed dramatically in the last 20 years or so. So it used to be that companies would rely on local notice boards, then newspaper adverts, then trade magazines came into play, and then radio advertising. And this worked really well, but the natural limitation was that you only had a very small number of people that you could reach in the job market. You only had a small number of people you could access. And in these times, if you might have heard stories of or been given advice, just go and hand your CV and walk into the receptionist and give them your CV. When this was how companies hired, that made sense. And company processes were more basic. They had a limited number of candidates. So when someone walked in off the street, they were able to deal with that. And then the internet came along, and companies thought, hey, we don't have to be so limited with our pool of candidates. If we advertise jobs online, then we can get candidates, the best candidates from all over the world. And the good news for companies is that it worked. But the bad news for companies was that it worked. And they were now inundated with applications, and they couldn't physically process them all. This was really highlighted to me. So Ernesto mentioned that I worked for Whitbread, who own Premier Inn. Whitbread actually sold Costa about a year and a half ago, which is very fortunate for us because it meant we've been able to navigate coronavirus and the COVID period when most of our hotels have been shut because we had some of the money from the Costa sale. But anyway, I was speaking to the head of recruitment at Whitbread, which are a FTSE 50 business. And she said to me, Adam, how the hell are we supposed to fairly differentiate between 700 candidates who could all do the job? So let that sink in. 700 applications they can get for a role, and every single one of them is qualified to do the job. How the hell are they supposed to differentiate between that? And so just to help themselves process this vast number of applications, they invented their own monster, which is called the Applicant Tracking System. And the sole purpose of the Applicant Tracking System is to help them automate and sift out applications, sift through the applications, so that only the top list makes it through to be reviewed by an actual human being. But despite some of these companies having millions and millions to invest in their technology, the actual software remains relatively limited and relatively basic. So because for top companies, why do they need to change it? They've got the companies with all the cash to invest. They're getting all the top talent coming to them anyway, and they get to pick and choose who works for them from the best in the market. And the companies who maybe do need a better way of doing things don't necessarily have the funds to invest in finding those better ways of doing things. So the problem with this is that tons and tons of great and qualified candidates like you end up being overlooked for reasons which have absolutely nothing to do with your ability to do the job, such as how you format your CV. So the system can only read certain formats. And if you're using the wrong keywords, and this is going to be even harder when English isn't your first language, or if you're like me, I'm dyslexic, so I make spelling mistakes. So no doubt I was making spelling mistakes on my CV, and that was one of the reasons it was being rejected. And to be honest, it's totally unfair, right? No actual human being should not get that break, or they shouldn't be overlooked, or they should not be able to provide for themselves and their family, or to go and live their dream, get their dream role because they use the wrong formatting or the wrong keyword. So the system on both sides is broken. And the fact that you haven't been successful so far, as I said, it's not your fault. So to summarize, the conventional wisdom that you've been taught for how to find a job no longer works. Companies have a monster of a system that is really unfair on the candidates. It's a cold system making very human decisions. And the fact that companies don't like it either, but don't really invest in improving it, that's for another topic. And that does mean that, yes, the system is rigged against you. But the good news is that by attending the webinar tonight, you aren't going to have to worry about this anymore. We're going to blow the system open, and I'm going to show you exactly how to navigate through the job market jungle so that you can pick and choose where you land interviews. Even if you're looking to make a career change, make a step up, or you've come from overseas, you've qualified overseas and haven't been able to land a job in that career in that sector in the UK. It's a system that I've used myself and I've helped countless others with as well. And I do it all without applying online. Now, some of you might be thinking, who is this guy and why should we listen to him? Other than Ernesto's lovely introduction. But you'd be right to ask that question. So as Ernesto said, since 2011, I've had a successful career in the corporate world. As he said, I spent 5.5 years at PwC and Ernst & Young in their HR consulting teams. And in addition, the last 4.5 years, I've been working at Whitbread, the FTSE 50 business, which owns Premier Inn. And my work has primarily been around working with executives, and directors to help them develop and implement their strategy. And as Ernesto mentioned, while working, while working consulting, you can see some of my clients, so some of the leading organizations that I've worked with on the right-hand side. That's companies in pharmaceuticals, in finance, in defense, in health, in government, in telecoms, to name just a few. And the focus of those roles was really supporting HR functions on large-scale programs and projects, and supporting them with large-scale change programs. So when they're trying to change something. And as Ernesto mentioned, of particular relevance here is that I worked with a lot of these organizations, revamping, redesigning, or designing from scratch their recruitment processes and functions. So I really got under the skin of the recruitment function and the recruitment process. But as the title of tonight suggests, the truth is it wasn't always this way. And I had a huge amount of setbacks to overcome to get to this point. So as I mentioned, I'm dyslexic. When I was learning as a child, I was already 2 years behind my peers in terms of learning to read. So in the UK, you start to learn to read at 5 years old. At 7 years old, I still couldn't read. When it came to my A levels, it was really frustrating and infuriating, because with all of these challenges, I put my heart and soul into my revision for my exams, and then I just had a dyslexic blank in one of my exams, which an exam I knew inside out, and I missed out on the grades I needed to get onto the graduate programs on most graduate marks by 1 mark, literally 1 mark off, and that just meant I couldn't apply to pretty much any graduate scheme. And talked about making a career switch. The fact that I was doing something completely different. I was actually before I got into pizza delivery, I was working in an educational charity. But before that, even I did have an HR job. So I've always wanted to work in human resources, and I did have an HR job. But I got married young. I got married at 19, believe it or not, and I had a child on the way when I was finishing university. And so I actually quit the job that I had. I actually had my job lined up. I had a job that I wanted, and I quit that so that I could finish university early and that I could go to work and start earning money. And then I took the first job after uni that I could get, which was doing operations and facilities at an educational charity. To be honest, it was a wonderful place to work. It's the kind of place where you make friends for life. I've still got friends from my time working there. But career-wise, it wasn't what I wanted to do, and it wasn't taking me where I wanted to go. And I still had dreams. I had what I can only describe as what felt like a calling in my life, that I was meant for something bigger. I'd always been fascinated in people, and I was passionate about making people's life better where they spent most of their time, which is at work. And on a personal side, I wanted to build a life for myself, for my wife, for my family, and I couldn't give them that life, the life that I dreamed of where I was. I'd look at all my friends who'd made it in the corporate world. They were working for some of the world's best organizations. And I just had this pattern in my life of just missing out. and it felt like a weight I'd carry around with me, that I didn't have the same status as some of my peers. So when I was working in this educational charity, I started doing another degree in human resources to help me make that career shift. And finally, for the first time in a long time, I'm feeling like I'm building towards my goal. That feeling that I'm lightning, that feeling was sort of lightning and coming off that I'm actually on a journey. I'm actually going somewhere. And then just as I had my second child, it was 2008. So in 2008, we had the banking crisis. We had a recession, and working in an educational charity, they had to make cutbacks. At first, the relief I felt when I didn't receive a letter was very short-lived. I remember I can remember it as if it was yesterday. I was sitting at the computer reading an email from my boss, and it was just like the panic, the fear rising from the very pit of my stomach. And the truth is, they were being kind to me by delaying the news because I just had a child, and they were waiting for me to come back from paternity leave, and I was at risk of losing my job. And I was sitting there thinking, what the hell am I going to tell my wife? But as part of the redundancy process, I put together, a really detailed and incredible proposal for an alternative role, and I showed them that I could save them time, I could increase productivity, but I feared it would all be for nothing, and sure enough, my fears were realised when I was out on my own. So after coming to terms with the fact that I'd lost my safety net, I actually entered the job market quite positive. I'm generally quite a positive person, glass half full, and I was full of hope and expectation that by being able to spend 100% of my time dedicated to changing career, I'd soon land a job, no problem. And I did all the logical things that we talked about that you're supposed to do. I went onto job sites, I went onto company websites, I was trying to apply for graduate programs, I was trying to speak to recruiters, I was trying my hand at networking. But the days, they turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months. And I was beginning to realize that this was going to be a great deal trickier, a lot harder than I thought. In fact, I spent the next 2 years of my life stumbling around in the dark with all these approaches, but no matter what I did, nothing I tried seemed to do the trick. Like I said, hundreds of applications, had no response, or a response from a robot, from an automated system. I would have an interview and get no feedback. Or when I did get feedback, it was always, you're the second choice candidate. I heard that a lot. You're the second choice candidate. We really liked you, but you just missed out to the other candidate. And when I with my networking, it just wasn't quite clicking for some reason. At best, it felt like there were meetings that didn't really go anywhere. And at worst, as an introvert, I had the pain of networking events where, to be honest, I was far too shy to talk to people. I'd go to these job networking events, and I'd spend my whole time pretending to be, getting food from the buffet, or pretending I was dealing with an important email just so that I didn't have to speak to people. And to some extent, I'd snookered myself because of the experience I had before, and I had a master's degree by this stage. I overqualified myself for entry-level positions. But because I was trying to change career, I didn't have enough of the right experience to get the more senior positions, to get the manager type job. To add to the emotional strain, during this time, I was living with my in-laws while not supporting their daughter. Remember, South American father-in-law, you can relate to what that was like. I felt like I had eyes on me all the time, that I was being judged. I felt like I wasn't good enough in their eyes for their daughter. And I was regularly told, Adam, just apply for anything and everything. And, to be honest, it felt logical that the more types of jobs you apply for, the more chance you have of landing something. But, it wasn't working, which I'll go into why a little bit later. Now, I did have a couple of small wins on the journey, but they continued to fail to snowball into that dream role that I really wanted, that dream permanent HR role. I managed to land a couple of small temporary sort of low paid contracts. I managed to land a temporary contract doing headhunting, so recruiting for executives, which, although I didn't actually enjoy it that much, it turned out to be an absolute godsend in terms of the skills that I learned for later on in my job search. And I started to try more and more left field ideas just to try things in desperation, including when I was going through my second degree, my master's degree. I used my dissertation as a research and a networking tool. And I helped my wife to start a business as well. But it wasn't my calling to go and work in that business. I was just there temporarily to help her set up. And actually, at one point, I did manage to land a role through my dissertation networking. But it was one of those roles where, I don't know if you've ever had it, my gut was screaming at me, Adam, do not take this job. It's not right for you. Do not take this job. But I needed to earn money. What choice did I have? But alas, my gut was right. And a few weeks later, I was back out on the job market again. So my wife and I, we were, to be honest, we were getting desperate. Things were bleak. We genuinely couldn't see a way out. And when you're anxious, you don't always think straight. And for us, we thought, maybe the grass is greener on the other side. And so we started to explore moving overseas. And believe me, this is the last thing that as a family we wanted to do. I've got family, I've got my friends, I've got my whole life in London. And you guys all know more than me what the challenges of moving overseas. But, desperate times call for desperate measures. So I went to an organization that helped people move overseas, and I had a meeting about how to find work in a new country. And they gave me advice that would forever alter the course of my life. At that moment, I didn't actually realize how significant the advice was, but I was so desperate that I was willing to try anything. And the advice they gave me was actually very simple. Reach out to people doing the work you want in the country you want and ask them for advice. That was it. Reach out to people doing the work you want in the country you want and ask them for advice. Now, by this point, I tried everything. So I thought, what the heck, I'll go for it. And at this time, I was helping my wife with her business, and I'd taken on a job as a pizza delivery driver. So I was delivering pizza at night. So I hardly had any time to focus on my job search. But I made about 10 minutes a night over a week or so to start to reach out to a handful of people in the country I was looking to move to. And to be honest, I couldn't believe it. It actually started to work. And that's where I had my aha moment. For the first time in my job search, I was making significant traction. But I thought, I didn't need to use this overseas. I could use this right here where I live. And if I combined it with the skills that I learned in headhunting, then I could do this at scale and at pace. Once I realized what I thought I had at my disposal, the excitement was literally coursing through my body to start using it and not just land any job, but my dream job. And so I got to work and put it into action. And the results were simply incredible. So bear in mind, I had no network or no contacts in the companies I wanted to work for. I went from no hope and no obvious way out to suddenly I was having regular conversations. I was talking online, talking in person to people who were doing my dream job in my dream companies. And I remember the adrenaline shots when the first person came back to me, and the excitement sort of literally bubbled up inside me as I started to meet and have conversations with the right people. And again, I know I said this before, but I remember it vividly as if it were yesterday. I was in the car with my wife, and at the time I had 2 kids, and we were on the way to go for lunch with my family when my phone rang, and I got the phone call. And the words I'd been desperately waiting to hear: "We'd like to offer you the job." Now, I tried to remain calm and sound professional on the phone whilst I considered the offer, because I was also awaiting an offer from one of their competitors. So this was PwC who reached out, who were making me an offer. And during this call, my wife was looking at me funny. She was nervous, and she literally burst into tears when I told her the news. And given my background and experience, everyone at that family lunch was equally in a state of shock. So for context, I'd spent 2 years on the job market, failing and getting nowhere. 2 years of abject failure and miserable failure. So after 2 years of swimming against the tide, I landed my dream job in my #1 target organization, PwC, in just 8 weeks. I did it as a career change. I did it with little relevant experience. I did it with no big corporate experience. And on top of that, I got a 30 to 40%, I can't remember the exact figure, but roughly 30% pay rise on my last permanent job. I'll be honest, I could not believe how well it worked, and neither could my friends and my family. And they started sending people my way so that I could help them as well. And then other people started reaching out to me for help. And so I continued to help people sort of informally and on the side for several years as I focused on building my corporate career. So first at PwC, then Ernst & Young and Whitbread. And somewhat ironically, the knowledge and experience of the recruitment process that I learned during this journey, during this 2 years this 2-year journey meant that a significant number of the projects, the consulting projects I worked on, were with some of the world's leading organizations, as I said before, helping them build out their recruitment processes. And this included supporting on and eventually leading programs, projects and work streams at the Ministry of Defence, which is part of the UK government, Lloyds Banking Group, Ernst & Young, Royal Bank of Scotland, and Whitbread, where I am at the moment, amongst others. So in addition to supporting and working on recruitment activities in my own teams, which really sort of fortified and intensified my knowledge and understanding of how recruitment works and how job seekers need to navigate their way around and through it you're almost guaranteed to almost guarantee the results that you want. So after I landed my dream job in just 8 weeks, I was able to make those first steps towards the life that my wife and I dreamed for. We dreamed of for ourselves and our family. We were able to move out of our in-laws and into our first home. And for me, to be honest, what was even better for me was my personal transformation that I went through on this journey. As tough as those 2 years were, I grew and developed a lot of the competencies and skills I actually needed to be successful in my own career. And all the little victories, all the little things that I did on the journey suddenly became factors in my success. So the redundancy proposal that I made to my organization, the dissertation project, which I used as a networking tool, helping my wife starting a business, delivering pizza. I can't tell you, PwC and Deloitte were drooling over themselves at the fact that I was out there delivering pizzas. They loved it. I can't tell you. I talked in my interview with some of the world's leading organizations that I was a pizza delivery boy, and it helped me get the job. So anyway, this was fine and dandy for several years. I continued to support and help people with their job search informally on the side. But then 2020 rolled around, and Whitbread owning Premier Inn, which is a hotel business, the last 12 months for Whitbread and the hospitality sector has been very, very difficult. And last year I was put on furlough leave. So you can imagine my wife was panicking, I was nervous, and my first thought was, oh no, not again. So between so this is this time last year, between and around homeschooling, I got to work. I had the process. I'd used the process before. I just needed to adapt it slightly to warm up the network that I'd built over the last 10 years. And I'd spend literally an hour every day checking in with my LinkedIn network. It was the same prospect. It was the same framework. It was the same process, just a slight different tweak on it. And I'll be honest, it worked again. In 6 weeks, I'd probably had 7, 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there, nearly double figures of people in my network tell me, Adam, if you need a job, come to us and we'll sort you out. You don't need to worry. So I'll be honest, collective relief. I had my safety blanket in place. But spending all that time on LinkedIn, I saw just how many people were struggling. So I started reaching out to individuals. I started leaving comments on LinkedIn on people's posts. I started having conversations with people offline. I started doing one-on-one calls with people. I started doing online group coaching sessions. And then I offered to do a webinar similar to this for an employment-based charity. And I asked, would you mind if I do a promotional post on LinkedIn about it? Now, I'd never been active on LinkedIn before, but that post absolutely exploded. So it went viral. It had over 200,000 views, it had thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. And I continued posting advice every day. And I've continued to help literally hundreds and thousands of people through my post, through the conversations I've had, through my clients over the last year. And this was going back to this time last year. This was great. This was wonderful. Except suddenly, when I was called back from furlough leave, I suddenly didn't have time to help as many people as I wanted to. And I was frustrated that there's only a limited number of people that I can help on an individual basis. So I dissected everything I did for myself that I'd helped others do. I did tons of research. I geeked out. I worked through the theory behind what worked, behind why it worked. There were things that were obvious, but some of the concepts needed a lot of deep analysis to work through. I added things into the framework. I tested it with others, and I stripped out what didn't work. And through this process of geeking out on the research, I added tons and tons into the framework. But then when I tested it, I realized it didn't work so well. People weren't really getting it. So again, I stripped it all back and built up what was both the most simple yet effective approach that you can take in your job search when you're in some of the situations we've talked about. And that process is something that I call a prospect funnel framework, which I'll talk you through in a minute. So it took me 2.5 years to figure out and piece together just the initial framework. And then the last 10, 11 months of building, trialing, resetting and rebuilding this framework. And I went through all of that trial and terror so that people like you don't have to. And now my coaching clients get the results like I did in record speeds. So that's my story. But some of you might be thinking, will it work for me? Or, but I don't have the relevant experience. You were in the country, but I've moved from overseas. Or, will this work in my industry? Or, I'm a graduate, I'm mid-level, I'm a director, I'm unemployed. Will this work for me? And these are great and valid questions. But the truth is, this isn't just my story. Some of my clients' success stories have been just phenomenal. In the 2020, so in the pandemic alone, the average time on the job market is 5.5 months. That's the average, which means that for half of job seekers, it's taking longer than this. And then I look at some of my clients landing multiple offers during that same period in just weeks, 3, 4, 5, 10 weeks. So let me tell you Olivia's story. So Olivia came to me crying. She's a single mum and she was made redundant. That panic, that fear. She had no idea how she was going to put food on the table or pay her bills. The raw emotions were there as she needed to quickly find something to be able to look after her and her son. Now, Olivia hadn't been on the job market. She'd been working. She hadn't been on the job market for years, and she was unsure how to approach it. And she'd already started on job sites when she came to me. Now, we worked together and I gave her the strategies and the toolkit for her to approach. And we weren't due to speak for another couple of weeks. But then I received a message from her just shy of 3 weeks after our first meeting. And I was absolutely buzzing, as I've never had someone get hired as quickly as I have before her. She found some companies she wanted to work for, and she was approaching people in every single one. And she managed to land interviews at 4 different companies. This is in 3 weeks. And she was in the envious position of being able to turn down jobs, and all during the height of the COVID pandemic. We spoke a few weeks after she landed the role, and she told me that the best part of the whole thing was that she was so much happier than she ever was in the 6 years at her prior job. And that for the first time in her life, she feels valued and appreciated at work. Now, we aren't all Olivia, and we aren't all going to get results like her. But now that we can see some of the results, let's build on our understanding of exactly how the system is broken and what we need to do differently to start getting those results. So I've described why the system, a little bit about the system is broken, but to be honest, all I've done is talked about it. Now I want to go down a level, and I'm going to show you exactly why it's so tough to land a job. And with this will help understand the framework about why the traditional approaches don't work, and why the framework that I stumbled upon does work. And it all starts with a question: why do companies hire? Why do companies hire? Companies hire to solve a problem that they have. They have a very specific problem. They have something that needs doing or solving, and they don't have the person, or they don't have the people that they need to solve that problem right now. And they want to find a good number. The more qualified candidates they can get, they can then cherry pick the best candidates. But excuse me, but we know that with the online job market, they are inundated with applications, and they need to set up a process or a funnel with each step designed to sift out those who don't float to the top to the top of that stage of the candidates at that stage. And this is a picture that I've drawn for companies in terms of mapping out and drawing out what their process needs to look like. And now we have to remember, this funnel process is set up to help the company achieve their goals. And that's really important to understand. This process isn't set up to help you. It's not set up to help you. It's set up to help the companies achieve their goals. So this is their funnel, and you're playing by their rules. Now, I don't know if you've seen the film or read the book, The Hunger Games. And if it's a little bit like that. The odds are very much not in your favor, and it's very much eliminating the weakest at each stage of the process. Now, to make it worse, because of the sheer volume of applications, the initial filters are much more about processing volume than they are truly about assessing who's the right person for the job. So let's walk through what the funnel looks like to bring it to life, and why it's set up against you. So the first thing that companies do is they will advertise for a position. Now, on average, according to glassdoor.com, in 2020, there was 250 applicants per role. Now, that's everything from your small local business right up to Google, who get thousands and thousands of applications. But on average, you're getting 250 applicants per role. Now, if you do the math straight away, you've already got less than a 2% chance of even landing an interview if you have the exact right background. Like I said, this is average. There'll be companies which are higher and companies which are lower. And I talked about Whitbreads, the fact that they can have 700 applicants for a role, and it's impossible to distinguish between all of them. So how do companies filter that? Well, we talked about that. They bring in the applicant tracking system. Now, that is the software which scans your CV, and it's designed to filter out the bottom 70% of the applications. But to be honest, some of those reasons for filtering out have got absolutely nothing to do with your ability to do the job. You might use, as I mentioned earlier, you might use the wrong keywords, you might spell it wrong, you might use the wrong formatting, and they'll literally rank and eliminate your CV with around 70% being filtered out without even being looked at by a human being. So you might think it gets better at this stage once we get to the next stage, but it doesn't get any better. Recruiters, on average, according to theladders.com, recruiters spend 6 to 10 seconds, let that sink in, 6 to 10 seconds scanning your CV. And a recruiter is incentivized to close multiple positions as quickly as possible. So once they've got their shortlist, maybe 4 to 6 people that they're happy to give to the hiring manager, it's not a good use of their time to go through the rest of these 60 CVs. Pretty much every single one of them, there might be some exceptions, but almost all of them will stop once they get to their shortlist. So not only do you have to get through this part of the system and get through the software scan, you have to hope that you're one of the first 10 CVs that the recruiter looks at. And if you're not, tough luck. And again, it's likely you'll be out of the process without even being looked at. So the next stage of the process, like I said, you've got the recruiter. They have the long list that it goes to the hiring manager. This is where it becomes a little bit more of an even playing field. But I don't know about you. Oftentimes I'd go through the process and I'd feel like more often than not, the company already had someone in mind, someone that was known to them who they wanted to give the job for. And actually they just kind of needed to go through the motions just to confirm, maybe tick some boxes, maybe just double check that there's no one else better out there. But a lot of the time they end up giving the job to someone that they already know. So the people getting through these filters are people who have the right keywords, they've got the right experience, but it's nearly impossible for someone looking to make a significant career change to progress through here. And yet this is the approach that so many of us use because that's what we're told to do. We're that salmon swimming upstream trying to be successful. So again, the odds are stacked against you. The initial process stages are terrible at assessing capability. As a parallel example, I used to play football when I was younger. I actually had a trial with a Premier League club, which clearly went brilliantly. But I had a trial. But the way they assessed me was I didn't submit a piece of paper with all my accomplishments on them. They actually saw me in action. They actually came and watched me play. And the CV is just a really terrible way of communicating the value that you bring to an organization. It doesn't bring you to life. And companies, number 3, as in my conversation with that FTSE 50 recruiter, the ATS, they just want to how can they distinguish between 700 people who can all do the job? And the ATS system, actually told me it's not great for companies either, and they can find it really difficult to find the right candidates. And actually, the hiring process is actually really risky for companies. They want to take as much action as they can to remove that risk as possible. And one of the ways they can do this, and I've seen this with my own eyes, I've sat in interviews where this has happened, is they go for the candidate that they know and trust, so that the risk, whether it's real or it's just in their head, is reduced. But why is hiring so risky? So what is the risk that they're trying to remove? So this is going to paint a slightly different picture. So here's some statistics. On average, the average cost to hire somebody in the UK is £3,000. If somebody leaves a role, it costs approximately 33% of that person's salary of that role to hire a replacement. And then you've got a gap as well. Remember, if you're hiring, you've got something that needs being done. That needs to be done now. That needs to be done today. And you've got an average time to hire in companies of 39 days. And you've got 6 months, literally 6 months until someone is at full productivity. So that is a hell of a long time from the time you have a need to the time that someone is at the point where they're productive before you're actually starting to get the value. So from a company's point of view, they don't want to have to start this process all over again. They can't afford to make a mistake. They can't afford to make a mistake. So they want to reduce the risk in the hiring process. So if the whole system doesn't work, what are we supposed to do instead? This is the only, some of these recruitment processes, this is the only way we know, or this is the only way we know how to apply. And especially in a candidate heavy market, and especially at leading companies, what are we supposed to do? So the number one thing we need to do is land a referral. And here, some people feel like they've exhausted all their options. And I certainly felt like I'd done that. I'd spoken to family, I'd spoken to friends, I'd even spoken to old school friends. But because I was looking to shift career, more often than not, they weren't the right people for me to connect with. And, similar for you, if you've come from overseas, even if you've had an established career in Venezuela, you don't have that network available in the UK for you to tap into. Now, when I was connected or when I was introduced to the right person, it always felt more like a pity meeting, like they were doing our shared connection a favor. And if people do reach out to strangers in their dream companies, they usually reach out to HR or recruiters. And hopefully Ernesto will back me up with this, but as an HR professional, I'm here to tell you that HR is not your friend. HR is not your friend. These aren't the people we should be targeting because they are not the decision makers. That's very important. HR are not the decision makers. They just facilitate the process. And here's why referrals are so powerful. In terms of where companies source candidates from, around 70% to 80% of their hires are made from referrals. But less than 10% of applicants are actually using this as a way to find their roles. Now, let's go back and compare that to the traditional method. The online jobs, probably they only account for about, the jobs that you see online, probably only account for around 20% of the total jobs available. And yet with online applications, 75% of the market is trying to squeeze through this small space, with each individual only having, each individual application having only around a 2% chance of succeeding. So the second thing we need to do is we need to build trust and we need to show value. And we need to do this with the decision makers or those who can influence the decision makers. And that's, the hiring managers or those working in your target teams. So now that we understand all this, how do we do that if we don't know anyone who works for the companies that we want to work for? Now, this is the funnel that we've looked at. This is the company funnel. We've understood why it doesn't work. So what I've done is essentially I've flipped the whole process around. Rather than having going through a company's process, if I just go back a slide, you can see that there's all these different people applying and only one person has a chance of succeeding. What we're doing is we're flipping that process around. So what do you need to do? The first thing you need to do is you need to set your goals, your target for what you're aiming for. Now, remember the advice, that I received, just apply for anything and everything. That advice feels logical, but I'll be honest, it is terrible advice for two reasons. Number one, practical. If you're applying for 10 different types of roles, that's 10 different CVs, 10 different interview preps. It's very time consuming to be able to tailor each of those applications for 10 different types of jobs. So you can actually physically process less applications in any given day. And the second reason is it's just not effective. If you're telling different types of stories, you've got to adapt your story for each different type of role that you're applying for, and that's less likely to work because you're less likely to be convincing. If you do get an interview, you might be less. You come across as less fluent because you're telling 10 different types of stories, and you come across as less sure-footed. So, although it's counterintuitive, the more focused you are, the more compelling you'll be, and the more effective you'll be in your job search. So every funnel needs to have a target to be built around. In other words, what's the company, what's the department and job you're aiming for? Once we have this, you can set up your funnel. And that looks a little bit like this. So like I said, step number one, target the company you want to work for. What's the department? What's the job that you're aiming for? Now, I don't know if you guys are on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is absolutely crucial for 95, 99% of jobs of jobs out there. And what you want to do is you want to be joining relevant LinkedIn groups. And the reason you want to join relevant LinkedIn groups is, let's say you're connected to 500 people, or it could be less, it could be more, but you can only see those 500 people and their connections and their connections. So you've got if you don't have a big network, if you don't have any of the right connections already, you're very limited on who you can interact with on LinkedIn. The way you can bypass this is if you join relevant groups, because every group member you can then access and you can interact with. So that's the second thing you need to do. The third thing you need to do is then you need to do a LinkedIn search for the company you want to work for, the job title of the hiring manager, and the location you want to work. And then literally it becomes a sales process. It's a sales funnel. So rather than online applications, which are kind of like a mile wide but an inch deep in terms of the relationships you build, this is being really focused, really narrow. But within that 1 inch, within that mile, or within that small space, that 1 inch, you're going a mile deep. So in all the right companies, you want to be sending a lot of connection requests, and I'll go through why that's really important. And when we reach out, we don't ask them for a job. We're not asking them to look at our CV. That's kind of like making an ask before you've built a relationship. The analogy which really brings that to life for me is it's like going on a blind date. Imagine going on a blind date. You meet someone for the first time and you sit down and the first thing you say is, when are we getting married and what are we going to call our kids? So you haven't invested in building a relationship. You need to build up that relationship. You need to add value to that person before you can start to make an ask from them. So that's what we're doing. So that's the first thing we do. We send out 100 messages. It could be more. You can do more than that. I probably sent about 200-300 messages. Now, like any good sales process, there is a conversion rate. Each stage of this process is going to convert at a certain percentage. So if you only send 10 messages and 3 people respond, that's 30%. And in all the time I've been doing this and helping people, it's always around 20 to 30 people. But if you're only sending 10 messages, then only 2 to 3 people are going to respond to those messages at this stage. So volume is really important once you're focused. Conscious of time, so I'll try and move this on just a little bit. So 20-30 responses. From that, you'll generate about 10 to 15 meetings from each of those responses. From those 10 to 15 meetings, you will then generate 4 or 5 different opportunities, which will lead to 1 or 2 offers. And that's why the numbers are really important. So again, if you've got a 30% conversion rate and you're only sending 10 messages, by the time you get to this stage, your funnels run dry. The volume is really, really important. And the best thing about these opportunities is, unlike those that were of a recruitment funnel, that the company's funnel, you've established trust and you've built a relationship before you get into the recruitment process. So when you do enter the process, you're being referred in either by the hiring manager or by somebody that they trust. And what that means is that you've got someone in the organization who's going to go to bat for you, and he's going to advocate for you on the inside. And that significantly increases your chance of landing interviews and landing an offer. So let me take you back to my story, and I'll tell you exactly how I did this on my journey. So for me, I wanted to work at PwC. So in the search feature in LinkedIn, I joined relevant groups, I joined HR groups, and I joined management consulting groups on LinkedIn. Then I did a search. I went into the search feature. I put HR manager. Now, for me, that was relevant because I wanted to work in HR. So you would do something that's relevant for you. So I did HR manager in the job title. In the company, I did PwC. And in the country, the location, I did London, because that's where I lived. So I sent out 100 messages. I got about 30 responses. excuse me, and I ended up meeting from PwC probably about 10 to 15 people. And then I did exactly the same process with Deloitte as well. And from doing this, I ended up having interviews at PwC and Deloitte. And actually, the way it worked for me is the first person I met at PwC, unless you remember James Kay. So James Kay was the person who referred me in. So I met with James. James gave me some great advice. I really liked him. I clicked well with him. I followed up with him a few weeks later to tell him how I'd been implementing the advice that he'd given me. And he said, "Oh, Adam, we're recruiting at the moment. Why don't you apply?" Now, at that stage in my career, if I just hit apply on the website, I would have been filtered out. But because James wrote the referral, because he did the referral, I bought myself a first round interview. And then, I don't know if you know this bit, Ernesto, but lo and behold, James was actually on the interview panel. So James ended up being one of the people who interviewed me. And the other great thing is a lot of companies have a referral bonus. So James, who's now referred me in and is now on the interview panel, is going to get paid £1,000 if he convinces everyone else in the room to hire me. Now, obviously, I had to do a good job. So, I absolutely had to earn it. So it was 100%, it was not favoritism, I had to earn it. But the way I'd set up the process, it allowed them to get to know me, and see what I was capable of, rather than being one of the 97% of people who fill in an online application and I'm just a name on a generic piece of paper, which they've got to read hundreds of these. And because you've built trust through this process, your conversion rate when you get to interviews is going to be significantly higher than for traditional approaches. And there's lots of things you can do to increase that conversion rate as well. But again, this hasn't just worked for me. Let me tell you a little bit about Nabila, which might be the most relevant for you. So Nabila, she had a dream, and we are coming to the end in a minute before we get into Q&A. She had a dream of working in the food industry, in research and development. And her dream industry, to work in was coffee. And she'd been studying in Belgium, and she was on a visa. So she was overseas on a student visa, but she only had 8 weeks left to find a role before she'd have to leave the country. And Nabila had been searching for a new job for months and months, and she'd been applying for loads and loads online with no success and no feedback on the process to know where she was going wrong. Her confidence was shot, and she was becoming desperate as the clock on her visa ticked down. To top it off, she did actually have a job, but she needed a pay rise to qualify for the visa that she needed, and her current company weren't going to give her that opportunity. They weren't going to pay her that. So I did a webinar like this last year. Nabila attended the webinar, and she reached out to me for help. And after we worked together, we honed her story, and we completely changed her approach to use this methodology. And she landed multiple interviews and offers in just 4 weeks. And this included one company creating a job for her. So that was literally an opportunity that existed for nobody else in the entire world other than for her. And she had different companies making counter offers to try and land her. The original job where she was working, they wanted to keep her, so they made her an offer. And with 4 weeks to spare, she accepted her dream role with the pay rise she needed to stay in Belgium. And I touched base with her again recently, and she said that the people she built those relationships with during this process are still reaching out to her several months later. And since then, she's continued to build her network and her ecosystem to have an endless stream of opportunity. I've got a couple more case studies, but I'm not gonna go through those now. But to summarize, just visually, you can see the difference in the process. When you're applying in a company through their process, there's only one person who's going to be successful and is going to make it through. When you set up your own funnel, when you set up your own process, you're putting companies through your process. It's your process, and therefore it's playing to your rules. And you've got so many more opportunities where you can see there's so many more green dots. There's so many more opportunities for you to convert and land a role to be successful. Now, there's only so much time that I can fit into a webinar. It's meant to be 45 minutes. I think I've gone over, and there's only so much I can go to. So what I've done, just very briefly, is I've put together what I call a Get Hired Bootcamp. And in this, again, I'll just in terms of where I can help, if hopefully what I've shared with you is enough for you to get going and for you to be really successful with your job search. But if you did want additional support, I show you exactly how to set up the funnel, how to set up the process. I teach you how to use storytelling. Storytelling is really powerful. So how to use storytelling to get people bought into you, into your journey. I show you how to set up your CV and your LinkedIn profile so that it's ready to convert opportunities as well. For a lot of my clients as well, they understand the process, but they need help with actually how do I convert those conversations? So when I'm going out with meeting people, what do I say? What do I need to do to get them on board? How do I even reach out to them? So I cover all of that. I did a psychology degree. I've got loads of psychology-backed approaches and tools and techniques which you can use to really help people buy into you, and for it to be their idea, for it to not come from you, but for them to really own the idea that you're someone that should work with them. And then the last area is I help people when it comes to the interviews, how to structure your interviews. Again, a lot of psychology goes into it. What are the key moments in the interviews? How do you prepare for it? What are the key points to deliver on? And then finally, how to negotiate. So I did a lot of research, and funnily enough, on how FBI hostage negotiation works. And I incorporated some of that into how you negotiate for salary. So that is a little bit about me, about my journey. Again, there's only so much I can go through in this webinar. But if you want to contact me afterwards, we'll do a Q&A. But if you've got further questions after the Q&A, if you think you might need a little bit of support, first of all, follow me on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn, follow me there, and you can ask me. You can ask me questions. But I post loads of free advice on LinkedIn, or you can email me as well. So with that, I will stop talking and hand over back to Ernesto for the Q&A.
Adam, thank you so much for such a valuable piece of information there, how we can actually land the interviews and the jobs that we want. I mean, there was so much, it was packed with helpful tips and certainly things that I know for sure, having been on both sides, the employee looking for a job in the corporate environment in companies like PwC, where I got the pleasure to work with you, but also now in the other side of the fence, where like you as well, I have worked in consulting projects, designing recruitment processes for companies and understanding in detail how they recruit. But in my double life, also being an entrepreneur and recruiting myself, a lot of people recently for the organizations and business that I'm involved with. So it's fascinating to see how, as you said at the beginning, the game is rigged against you in a way. When you're applying online, you're applying against thousands of people. The software is scanning your CV, looking for keywords only, and you might not make the cut. They don't even look at it. And even when they look at it, they will look at it only for 6 seconds. So it's fascinating. And definitely the approach has to change. If you want to really be successful in finding the jobs you want, you have to be creative, and your framework definitely give some of the information that we need. Let's go into Q&A. So we've got a few people online. So remind you that you can use the bottom Q&A to post your questions, and then we'll be discussing those. We only have one so far. I mean, I guess there was so much that maybe you asked already all the questions. But I do have also some notes that I've been taking, Adam, while you've been speaking. And I wanted to share some of the tips that I accumulated myself as well to complement some of the stuff that you've been saying. And I'm going to divide these as well, as we mentioned, by being an employee or somebody looking for a job, and also being an employer. In relation to the employee, I think you mentioned the importance of joining LinkedIn groups. And one thing that probably wasn't as clear enough, and I want to reiterate it a bit more, is one of those connections is not only potentially somebody in the organization that you want to work with, but also I highly advise that you connect with recruiters. In the UK, a lot of the business of getting jobs is managed by big companies that they have their online processes, but they also hire agencies to help them recruit, because such time-consuming activity. And the job of these companies is, of course, to get you a job, because they get paid when they place you in a position, right? So it's similar to the example of the internal referral. The person who's referring you gets a bonus, get paid for helping you to find that job. So if you actually get in the books of a lot of headhunters and recruitment companies, they'll be working for you at no cost to find your job because they'll get paid, right? So
can I add a subtle point there? So I've got jobs through recruiters as well. So absolutely 100% agree. Recruiters definitely have their place in the job market. When I was sharing my specific story, at that point in my journey, I wasn't an easy placement for recruiters because I didn't have the right background. So under those circumstances, because recruiters want to fit a round peg in a round hole, I wasn't a round peg at that time. So it was difficult for me to use recruiters. So if you do have the background for the job you want to, recruiters 100% use them, build relationships with them. They're really, really important. If you're looking to make a shift or some sort of career change, recruiters are a little bit harder to use at the initial stage of your job search for that initial move.
Absolutely.
That's my personal experience.
Yeah, and I think the other key piece of the goal is definitely those referrals. Yeah, because if you definitely, which is core to your strategy, if you actually get to have a contact in that company, that person is going to put your CV forward. It's going to recommend you either if you get paid or not for that bonus, but also just to the fact that it's recommended by somebody. People by people, and at the end of the day, that's how you completely, jump.
100%. If we think about the risk element, if you're a hiring manager and it's a risky decision, do you want to go with someone who you've pulled from a pile of CVs, or you've already got someone in your team who you trust and they're saying, you should hire an Esto for this job? You're going to take that very seriously. You're going to go, okay, and then let's go speak to an Esto because I trust Adam, and Adam says an Esto is good for the job. Yeah,
indeed. Right, so we got some questions, and I'm going to stop talking about some of my tips, and I just actually make sure that we have the last 15 minutes for questions from the audience. There are a few comments, Adam, in relation to how useful the webinar has been, so thank you very much for that. A lot of people praising the valuable content. Also, as a reminder, it's been recorded and it will be edited and it will be posted in our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and, of course, follow everything that we're doing at the Association of Venezuelans in the UK, AVEUK. So you can play back, you can watch as many times as you want, or you can even forward to a friend or family member you think it'd be useful for. So one of the first questions that we have is from Carlos, and he says, "Hi Adam, how do you get the contact addresses to reach out to the people in the area you were wishing to work for? Do you just approach the person randomly?" I think you went into this a little bit further on after the question was asked, but checking was primarily.
It's a great question, and there's not one way of doing it. There's the way I did it is when I did it on LinkedIn personally. So I would jump onto LinkedIn. I would use the search feature, and when you use the search feature, the way I described it, so I want to work for this company. This is the hiring team, or this is the likely job title of someone I want to connect with. This is the company. This is the location. Once you've joined the right groups, you're going to have a whole list of people come up on that search feature. And you've got paid options with LinkedIn. I did this all on the free version. You don't need to pay for LinkedIn Premium or anything like that. And then I would send an invitation to connect. And with that invitation, I would tailor my message as to why I was connecting. Now, so that's one way of doing it. More recently, people have had so I've had clients who've had a lot of success with just sending a blank invitation request, because you only get a limited number of characters. And then actually, once more people accept your invitation, you'd be surprised how many people just accept an invitation from someone they don't know. And so then once you're connected with them, you can send a much longer personalized message explaining why you're connecting, why you're reaching out. Some people, on LinkedIn, you've now got the option, which I didn't at the time, to do videos. So people will send video messages as well once they've connected. And that's a really good way for you to become a real person to that person, to the person you're reaching out to, for them to relate to you. So that I did all on LinkedIn. There are some email lookup tools. The name of the one I recommend has slipped my mind at the moment, but I will try and remember it, or I might look it up during while Vanessa is asking the next question. But there are tools, email tracker tools, where you can look up companies' email addresses, and then you can work out what their email address is at that company as well. So while Ernesto is reading the next question, let me go and remind myself what that one's called.
Yeah, and I think to add to what just Adam said, I think part of the question that Carlos was asking, well, how do you approach this person for the first time? And it's a cold approach on LinkedIn. In the beginning, it is a cold approach on LinkedIn, but one of the things, remember, one of the key elements that I'm taking away from Adam's content today is that you're approaching the person not just to establish a random relationship. Remember that you're approaching the person that has a job or is in the area that you want to work on, and you're actually asking for advice. So this is very flattering for the person that you're contacting. Say, hi, he is John. John, hope you don't mind me connecting. I'm in work in this area. Just your name popped up. Came across your profile. It's a great line to put. I came across your profile so that we have very similar background. Know that we are also member of this group. And I'm just wondering if you will have 10 minutes just to help me with some questions. I'm looking to get into this industry, and it seems, give me some advice. Or another alternative, especially that I did myself and that I saw some people doing, very successful, inviting people for lunch or for a coffee. Of course, not in the COVID times, but once we're out of lockdown, invite them for lunch, pay for lunch. And invite them for lunch and say, can I just pick your brains on how you actually, how's the market, how's the type of role in the industry today, that kind of stuff. So it's about, and as Adam said, you might reach out to 100, only 10 might respond, but those 10 are worth following up with. Right? Because that's what
I want to add to that. What you said, Ernesto, was almost word for word some of my initial outreach messages to people like James and other people, which was just, I came across your profile. This is a company I'm looking at that I'm really interested in. I'd love to get your advice. So you want to make the approach about the other person. So I get thousands of messages from people saying, I need a job. And okay, what can I do with that? I don't know you from anyone. For most people, that's really difficult for them to know how to help you. And again, that makes your approach all about you. If you say, can I have a job? When the whole mindset is, how can I help add value to that other person? And as Ernesto said, one of the things you need to know, your profile, what about their profile was interesting to you? What about their profile is interesting to you? One of the things you can do, which is really clever, is if you've got a slightly unconventional background, you can find people who've worked in the companies that you've worked for and who now work in the company you want to work for. So you can add all of that in to the search feature. So you get a smaller list, but then when you reach out to them, you can say, I noticed that you used to work here like I did. I'd love to, and have now transitioned into this. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey. So again, you're showing an interest in the other person, and the fact, for you guys, maybe you can target people who've moved over from Venezuela and built up a really successful career in the UK in the companies you want to work for, and they're going to be, because they've gone on an unusual journey, they're going to be really proud and really excited to help someone else on that journey as well. But otherwise, I totally agree with the messages and the type of approach that Ernesto said. It's almost word for word what I help my clients with. And just going back to the previous question, I'm going into the comments and I'm putting some of the websites that I use for email tracker tools.
I'll put those on later because they cannot see comments.
Fine, so you can share that after.
Yeah, I'll put this on the Q&A. But what I wanted to add, in addition to what Adam just said, and I think it comes it's very pertinent to mention now, that's exactly what the Association of Venezuelans in the UK is for. So there were 30 of you right now left in the audience Q&As. There's 800 members that we already have. Many of the members already registered in the association are professionals. Many of them are working. I can scrunch the names right here, the people that are currently connected. Some of them are actually working already in big corporates. I don't even know why they're here. Or maybe they want to change jobs. We as a community, that's the reason why we exist, to help each other, to support each other, because many of us will have a contact in a corporation and they'll be happy to help to do an introduction. It's about how to bypass, isn't it, all of those humps and obstacles that are presented, right at the beginning when you're trying to look for a job. When you send in
and the fact that you've got this community here is incredible in and of itself. You can speak to people and say, I'm also a member of this community. It'd be great to go for that coffee, like Ernesto said, and they are going to be so happy to help each other because that's what you're there for. When you're a community overseas in a minority, you stick together and you help each other out. By definition, that's what you do. and you've got a really rich community which can be here to help and support you.
Right. So we got 2 more questions, Adam, but they are already being answered, I believe, but I'll write them out anyway. And if any of you listen and have any other final question before then we sort of summarize and finalize the session, then pop it into the Q&A box right away. Also, if you want to speak, then just raise your hand and then we can let you in. So Santiago says, how should be that first message that we're going to send to potential people that can help us to land the job? Santiago, that's exactly what you just done. Talk about now, and came across your profile, interesting to know about your journey, that kind of thing. Remember, it's about building the relationship, seeking advice, making them feel that you admire them, that you're flat, and flatten them to give them a...
Flattery goes a long way.
Yeah. Alejandro was telling us, I would like to know more, how can we build a relationship with a stranger in the company I want to work with? This is extremely difficult, he says. You suggest to write several people in this company and expect a response to start from that? Yes, that's what we're saying, kind of. So, yeah.
And again, just in terms of my own experience and my clients' experiences, there's a lot of people who are out there who want to help you. And Esther mentioned not everyone's going to respond, and I mentioned that. That's a good thing. If you send out 100 messages, you don't want to have to speak to 100 people. What you want to do is you want to find from those 100 people those who are inclined and have the time to help and support you, and those are the people who respond. And so the people who actually come back to you are those who are going to help you, who are most likely to help you. So it's kind of like a filtering mechanism. By sending out 100 messages, actually, I don't need to speak to those 70 people because they're a waste of my time. But these 30 people, I'm going to get some good results with.
Yeah, exactly that. So we got 2 final ones, and with this, we close and we go. We got Freddie Ramos asking, thanks, Adam, for such useful presentation. Have you applied your method to not only apply for your dream job, but in order to build your dream company? Do you think will it be the same networking process to go through? And Adam, you are an entrepreneur yourself now with your business. So what do you say to that?
So you can also give your experiences being a successful entrepreneur yourself. But essentially, I alluded to the fact that this was kind of a sales process. So it is a sales process. And so it depends on the type of model you use. So the way I get most of my clients now, I don't do the direct outreach. I create content on LinkedIn and people start coming to me. But there are lots of people who will use LinkedIn to find their ideal client and then reach out to build a relationship with those people. So it is a sales process. And again, like any good sales process, and it depends on the business that you're setting up, but building relationships with people, taking an interest in your client, what their problems are, how you can help solve their problems. It applies to a job search and it applies to sales in a business. Yeah,
certainly. And I can definitely confirm, sort of echo what you said in relation to growing your business. It doesn't matter what it is. LinkedIn is such a powerful engine, such a powerful tool. Make sure your profile really shows who you are, that encapsulates what you're looking for. Make it attractive, put a photo in there, and connect.
Really important.
Be part of groups, different groups. Show your personality, even filling in the parts of like voluntary work, awards, that sort of stuff. All of that's super important. I can tell you that when I was in the corporate world for just 50 years before I left the corporate world together, all my jobs were through LinkedIn, from the very beginning and to the very end. And the very first job, as you said, Adam, not having that that background so that the recruiter can put you forward, my very first job was through a connection. So met somebody at a party, and that I was constantly, I had my pitch ready, like this is what I do, this is where I come from, this is what I've been doing, and this is what I'm looking for. And then being always very interested in the people that you meet. Don't just talk about you, So tell me about you, what do you do, and how do you get into a career? Show genuine interest, because then that person will, feel that sort of connection with you, and they potentially might offer to help. Even when you meet somebody socially, and you're curious about the area that we work in or the company you work in, oh, tell me how does it work? The same approach you're doing on LinkedIn, but do it live with the person in front of you when you are in a social circumstance.
100%. To build on that, there was a psychology experiment done in the 70s, I think, where they got 2 strangers to sit down and talk to each other, and then they asked for half an hour, and they measured how long each one of them spoke, and then they asked them afterwards, how much do you like the other person? What they were expecting to happen was the person who spoke less would like the other person more because they'd had more of a chance to get to know them. But it was the other way around. The person who spoke more liked the other person better. And the reason is because they felt listened to. They felt listened to. So the more you give the other people, the other person the opportunity to talk, the more that they're going to like you. So is that, so asking good questions, asking about them, asking about their journey. This is a great way to get people invested in liking you. And I've gone through meetings where I've seen this, where someone spent all the time talking, someone else, hardly said a word, and then that first person came out and goes, I really like that person. And I was sitting there thinking, the other person didn't say anything. How do you know you like them? But that's this principle. The more you give the person the chance to talk, the more you can learn about them as well. And one of the things that can be really effective in the follow-up is, if you've asked for advice or you found out more about them, if a couple of weeks later you can follow up and say, oh, I know you're interested in A, B, and C. I found this article. I thought that would be, this might be of interest to you. So it's another way of building the relationship, of giving, of adding value, before you then start to say, I saw this job, or could you refer me in, or before you ask for yourself. There's lots of great ways to add value to someone in a short space of time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right, so let's wrap up. We've got a couple of comments, and I have then 3 final tips to leave you with. Adam, Maria Paredes is interested in connecting with you. She just put that in the notes, but she's just sent you a LinkedIn request so that you look out for her. And Fatima is closing by saying, thank you so much to both yourself and myself for organizing this helpful webinar, great initiative. And Fatima, just go back to our YouTube channel. All the webinars are there. There are 3 more currently being edited, and check out what we've been doing. And also make sure that not only you are signed up to be a member of the Association of Venezuelans in the UK, AVEUK, UK, but also that you tell other Venezuelans, because the bigger the community, the more opportunities we all have to connect with people. We're just waiting for the restrictions to lift so that we can organize our first professional and networking event, where we'll be facilitating introductions and things like that, so you can all people meet and potentially get opportunities to get jobs and also build businesses. So let's close with something. I noted here 3 things that for me has been game changers. One of them is sometimes when you land an interview, if you really want to stand out, not only sort of fill the questions in the interview, but I have always did, offered something extra over and above. And I think Alan refers to this, offering value. If there was somebody that I really wanted a job, I said, I know that I have the experience to do the job, but also I really want to work on this job. I'll be willing to take an internship at the beginning, or I would like you to mentor me in this role. That line got me a job once. I'd like you to mentor me in a job. And the person answered, that's the very thing I could have heard, because what I'm looking for is somebody who I can mold, who I can shape, to help me with the company, and that made a difference, you can really find ways of building a connection that is just beyond a standard interview that most people will do, make something that makes you really stand out. Second one of my tips is final questions. When they ask you to ask questions, make the most of your time, right? Not only show that you know the company, but ask really, really insightful questions that make people like, wow, this guy or this person is quite intelligent, because, really interesting, look into it. There are 3 questions particularly that I used to ask that were game changer for me. One of the ones that I ask is, following the interview that we just had, are there any areas of doubt, of concern that you still have about my capability to get this job? That was an opportunity to preempt any doubts that they had, and then give me a chance to actually answer or sell myself on that point that they were not very convinced. Another question I had also is, what is the most important quality or trait that you're looking for amongst the candidates you're interviewing for this particular role? So that will then help them to tell me, okay, well, the critical thing about everything is this. And then I could then comment or mention how I could fulfill that bit. And another one, a bit more awkward sometimes, but finalize the interview asking, okay, if I were to ask you, how did I do in this interview, what would you say? you know, and that breaks the ice as well. People laugh, well, you're not supposed to ask me that, but you sort of create a really nice banter and, you know, an opportunity to again, make yourself stand out. And that was my second tip. And my final third tip for all my fellow Venezuelans here: do not ever think that you are not good enough to apply for a job. Reach out and ask and knock the door, because you never know who's going to open it for you. Sometimes we have the story in our heads that, oh, I'm not from here, maybe I'm not capable enough, maybe whatever. Knock the door, present yourself, you are valuable. People need people to help them with jobs, and maybe you are the person they're looking for, okay? And I want to invite you again to watch the webinar that is already on the YouTube channel about the psychology of success, and that one is in Spanish, where we actually talk about how many limiting beliefs and attitudes we sometimes get into where we don't have to, and what's the mindset that we have to approach this new life that we have in the UK, and how to succeed and professionally and personally. So do not get scared of the big companies. Do not get scared of the roles that you really dream. Don't sort of settle to apply for a subsequent role just because you think that you need to start from below. You know, challenge your mindset and go for what you want, because you might be a surprise. Right, Adam, thank you so much for...
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Ernesto.
Giving us an hour and a half of your very valuable time, sharing all the tips and all, you know, your journey with this community. And I'm sure some people will be in touch. Follow Adam on social media, connect with him on LinkedIn. Follow us also on LinkedIn. Now we have the group for the Association of Venezuelans in the UK, looking to connect all the Venezuelans professionally there as well. And keep an eye on our newsletters. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you. Bye-bye.